I'm going to move on to the next conversation, which is really my briefing to you about learning leadership versus systemic inequities. So hybrid logistics has been a really hot button for the Learning Council and all of the EduJedi for a couple of years. It actually started in 2019. We had a series of special reports come out talking about the shift in structure. And then the pandemic happened and we're like, well, now we got to go, much faster to talk about this. And we started a lot of other work, which I'm also going to talk about today. But let me tell you what the research is showing us. So number one pressure administratively across America, and it's kind of an invisible pressure. You don't see this easily, but it's space and time. Exactly what Cisco was just talking about, what Megan from Classing talked about, what Maury talked about from Powhatan. The use of space and time is so different, and it won't go back to full normal ever. This is just really, a known thing. In fact, Garland ISD said to us when we were in Dallas a couple of weeks ago, please get normal and back to normal out of your vocabulary, because there is no normal anymore. There's way too many families and parents who just feel like they want to pull the trigger on going back home any moment. Or schools have to just suddenly stop. We just met with a superintendent in Indianapolis who basically needs 101 bus drivers and only has 84. So had to move a bunch of their food staff into bus driving just to make sure they could bus all the students. And that means now kids only get peanut butter and jelly or salami sandwiches every day because they don't have time to also cook the meals. And if even one person goes out sick, they have to shut down the whole school district, because you can't have some kids bust in and some not. So this is the Wild West. That's not the only district experiencing this. Shortage of staff, all that other stuff. I'm going to talk about that some more. But what we're looking at is there will be a permanent demand by students on flexibility. That's not going to go away. So I'm so glad Cisco talked about that. But the master schedule complexity is also insane. So a lot of school districts that still sort of do their master scheduling with sticky notes all over big whiteboards. Goes on all, several weeks over the summer or even the year prior trying to figure that out. But now with all this flexibility demand, it's getting really, really arduous. And so district leaders have almost no admin time. We're seeing that as Learning Council in two ways. One, being able to carve out time on events, hard. But two, our readership went over 100,000 in new readers. People are looking for answers, but they want to do it at, 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night, early in the morning as school starts and they're waiting for all the kids to get there. We're living in a no admin time moment. It's just a mad scramble. There's emergencies every day, almost everywhere. And there's constant pandemic protocol battles. So where we were in 2019 is we were at 27% of the nation had already opted out. Now, charter schools arguably are public, so you have to sort of think with this on this graphic that I'm showing you right now. But the fastest growing segment, even then, before the pandemic, was homeschooling. I'm going to get into why that is, but it was growing at 20% then. Then the pandemic happened in 2020, and this is accelerated in 2021. I just want you to know. Now we're at 33.6%. These are astronomical numbers. You will not hear the feds talking about this. They haven't posted numbers in almost 4 years. It's an embarrassment. So most districts, their defection was about 3.6% that didn't come back. They were hoping they would come back, and most of them didn't. The estimate is really conservative, but the median number now is 18.86 million total students out of the 56 million that we have in that age category, and they're continuing losses. So the growth in the homeschooling market is now at 15.12 million and growing still at 20% annually. We have to be concerned about that as public education. As parents across America sort of look for options. And it's not just fear of viruses, it's optional curriculum, it's time flexibility and space flexibility. All of those come into play. So number two, staffing. This is a national problem. Getting teachers, getting administrators, the musical chairs in the administrative ranks is off the charts. We love it that we still know a lot of people as Learning Council, but we're meeting new ones all the time. It's a fantastic shift. And that, if you think about what it's like to change your own job, like if your job shifted and you have new title, you got new responsibilities. And imagine that happening for at least 50% of the market nationally, how much chaos that creates just by the job shift. That alone, on top of a pandemic, on top of bringing technology in for every single student, on top of them being in or out or flexible and need to be hybrid, blah, 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 all that other stuff. This is the Wild West. I mean, literally, if you just add all that up, it's just chaos. So, January survey, 74% of teachers say they're overwhelmed or burnt out. And Maury just talked about this morning. We're hearing that everywhere. So if you're an administrator, you're trying to, reel in the chaos and not put out any more edicts or tell people something else because you just know it's going to blow up in your face. They also say 47% unable to easily personalize. So that's a big number. What that means is a lot of what Maury was talking about in terms of the transition. Teachers are having to find lessons. Now they're sharing, collaborating like never before. They really need to, because otherwise they were literally having to take what they used to do in the analog world and build it in a matter of months, sometimes in some places weeks, so that it could be digitally executed. And now they're having to do it with a digital execution and a live component in many places, actually most places. And so they're running both rails. It's very exhausting. So when you think about personalizing, which is what the consumer markets are doing, homeschooling markets, or, private schools, charter schools, it's almost impossible because that's like you're still laying the road. Now you got to lay the side roads at the same time to additional materials for a kid who's got this learning disability and too hard. So the other thing is you got teachers who are sidetracked into what we call digital traffic. Digital traffic is repetitive distribution. I didn't get the email. Okay, I got to find the email and resend it to you. I didn't get this one resource. Okay, I got to do this. I can't log in, right? That's why we have ClassLink on. And that distribution and collection of assignments, resources, communication is what we call digital traffic. And there's more to it in the digital world than there is obviously in the analog world. In the analog world, you just put your assignments up on the board and here, you got to read this tonight, blah, 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 turn in your worksheets tomorrow or your essay tomorrow, right? So you just verbally communicated or you wrote it on your whiteboard. Now you have to do that distribution again, digitally. And then you get pelted with digital communications from individuals. Not like you can look at your class and somebody raised their hand and they answered the question and everybody heard it. No, this is a different realm and it takes a lot of adjusting. So we asked teachers how many hours they spend on the back and forth digital traffic of assignments, logins, which content, student, parent, email systems, monitoring, anything that isn't actually just direct instruction. Just look at these graphs. So 10 hours a week, 30% of your staff. If you do the financials on that, like what's your average salary? What is 10 hours? Multiply it times all your staff. This is huge. 18 hours, 18%, 5 to 10 hours a week. This is the teacher view. We also asked the same question. We're going to release this in our national survey of the administrators who think it's a lot less. So administrators are not necessarily observing the actuals of digital traffic, which is a really big focus they need to have going into 2022. All right. And the third biggest pressure, obviously, is loss of achievement. So 51% of students lost achievement in the last year. So there's a lot of catch up. So again, if you're still laying your digital brick roads on curriculum, your side roads of remediation, backtracking, learning loss, those are additional roads you're putting on your teachers to lay. It's a lot. We think the best thinking on that right now is have a flanking attack, have another set of people or an outside organization that helps you with this. Like that's the tutoring Maureen was talking about. So here's what we spent in the last year. You're going to be surprised at these numbers. $7.5 billion increase in tech adoption across all of K-12 in the United States. That's out of the $718 billion total revenue that the market takes. Huge spike. Here's what happened in hardware. We all know everyone was buying hardware. They're still buying hardware that they can't get enough of. Chips are slowing down. Shipping is getting weird. Companies are even telling Learning Council, we don't know if we can, get the chips we need to sell the stuff, right? So that's our problem. But hardware spiked by 4.5 billion. It'll be up another 400 billion this year. So it's retaining that growth and going up even higher. But major software systems only grew by 900 million. Those are your software, student information systems, learning management systems, the middleware and back end. It's not the front end curriculum stuff. The reason for that is 50% of the market had just joined the fray, and they were just sort of Google Docsing and finding little apps here and there and stuff, and not going the full infrastructure view yet of data repositories and having all that other stuff, their data lakes and all that. So what happened with digital curriculum, though, is that it increased by 2.1 billion. A lot of places buying all of their reading material, digital reading materials, digital math programs, courseware. Courseware just skyrocketed. All online courses, classes skyrocketed. We think that is going to increase at least by the 2 billion by the end of year numbers. 2021 paper is still going down. But the consumer comparison, this is a really interesting number, 13.1 billion in K-12 total spend, 5% compound annual growth rate. It might go a little bit higher in 2021 by the end of the year. But straight to consumer spike. It was already starting to wane. This is where your homeschooling issue comes in. So the consumer market, as soon as the shutdown happened, parents are like, my kids aren't learning anything. They're going to get behind. I'm going to go find an app. That's what happened. They all shopped the app markets. They found subscription sites, just tons of different things that they could find to help their kids learn. And that's what happened right when that shift happened. So now it's, back up to 25% growth rate, the consumer markets are. And it outpacing everything that K-12 spends already. And you'd think that wouldn't be true because we had 3 stimulus acts, but a lot of that money is not all spent, probably won't all be spent for years to come. But it really is an issue of also how schools are looking at their distribution of curriculum. Is the teacher building everything, or are they trying to buy and use professional grade courseware? So I think this is a good point in time for me to pause for a minute and welcome Wendy Allman and turn the screen over to her. And then I'm going to get into the 5th biggest issue that's going on in K-12 and the rest of the data. But Wendy, why don't I stop sharing and have you do a little interlude, because it's kind of a perfect place. I just talked about professional grade courseware. So why don't you do your intro from Renaissance? Go ahead.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Let me share my screen with everyone real quick here. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yep, I can see it.
Perfect. Well, first of all, it is an honor to be here with all of you today. I'm learning so much. I want to thank all of you for letting us join you this afternoon. My name is Wendy Allman. I'm a senior account executive here at Renaissance, and I've been with Renaissance for 27 years. So learning new things is just the most exciting thing that I am doing here this afternoon. And we are so happy to be here because we believe that students learn better when we all do work together. Here we really wrap our hands around and support continuous learning inside and outside the classroom. We did not realize how ready we were for something like this pandemic. We were able to send children home and have children being able to communicate with their teachers and not miss a beat. And how we did that is we followed our mission. My reason for working for this company all these years is because we are so educator and family oriented. We here at Renaissance believe that accelerating learning for all children and adults nationwide. When I started here 27 years ago, we were just in the United States. We are now covering the world with our software programs. And Renaissance here, we believe that all of your students grow at their have the opportunity to grow at their fullest potential. We know that when we all work together, students learn better. Teachers are more effective when they have access to having data to actually differentiate and create a personalized learning path for each and every one of their students. But we also believe that no educational tool or software program should ever replace that teacher. What we do know is school districts sent their teachers into a school year, the last 18 months approximately, and asked them to do a job that had never been done before. Their classrooms were rapidly changing, and learning was taking place in new ways and in new spaces. We had parents contacting us, scared, not knowing how to teach math. We helped those parents and those teachers make sure that their students stayed on pace. We know that when children are with you, they are not data points. Just because you see data the way you see it today doesn't mean that it can't be changed. Together with Renaissance and the power of the educator, we can change your student outcomes. And why we believe that is because we believe in you as educators. We are asking school districts to join us, to create a partnership. Together, we can make lots of take instructional time and give you back the time you need for these students and make sure that we're closing those gaps. The COVID slide is real. We have kids that could be 11 months behind. We can help close that gap if those with the right tools, and making sure that you are working with these students either inside or outside a classroom and the student doesn't know the difference. What I'd like to do is tell you where we started from. Renaissance started 35 years ago with a parent who had a teacher, who was a teacher, and she wanted her students in her classroom and her own students to learn to love to read. She built a program called Accelerated Reader. We're in millions of schools all over the country today. In 1996, Renaissance developed a 20-minute universal screener and progress monitoring tool for K through 12. They added resources and skills that were aligned to each of your state standards and gave the teacher the assurance that they were going to have the right practice at the right time. We didn't stop. When the pandemic hit, we provided 24/7 access to authentic text to ensure that all students engaged in frequently high-quality reading practice with unlimited access to thousands of enhanced digital books and age-appropriate news articles. The nice part about our MyOn program is kids without internet could be in a hotspot, download up to 20 books on a personal device, take it home and read it, and when they hit their next hotspot, the teachers can measure that reading with reading. Every one of your students should have a pathway to kindergarten readiness and with research-based indicators to early literacy, early numeracy, and that's social emotional development. Practice programs that reach your students at their own level with skill-based practice in math and in ELA. We provide districts and school leaders with relevant data that they need to quickly answer questions around how their district, school, and students are performing, whether their learning occurs in person, remote, or in a hybrid model. We also deliver a curriculum-based measurement. We're getting deeper in the weeds and giving you an in-depth insight into elementary students' development with curriculum-based measurements of reading and mathematics. We didn't stop. This year, I'm proud to say we've added a research-based phonics and comprehension program. And based on what we believe is the teacher is the most important job that anyone will ever do, we've added a program that offers interactive lessons, videos, gamifications, and activities all in a single platform. We're never going to stop. We are the leader in the industry showing student growth. And we support the learning where the students are learning at this time. Tiffany and I thank you for giving us the few minutes here to show how we can partner with school districts to ensure continuous learning inside and outside the classroom. Thank you.
Well, that was great, Wendy. And it was perfect because I had just finished talking about courseware. I'm really familiar with MyOn because they were on the road with us before you guys acquired them. They went on the road to a lot of cities and did a lot of demos. And I remember really doing a big review of their UI UX, the fact that you onboard with the Lexile test, and then the student is given, reading materials that are like at their reading, maybe slightly below, slightly above, so they're given this little library and they can, sort of go forward and read in there. That was awesome. I wish that had been done when I was a kid.
Me too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm on my second generation of children using these programs, and Mayan was mind-boggling. My granddaughter won't put her iPad down. She just keeps reading. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super fun. It's like it's right there and they take it everywhere they go. It's in the car, it's everywhere. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, so thank you very much for sharing.
You're very
I'm going to go forward and share my screen again and talk about this fifth complexity that research is showing everyone is facing right now, and that is digital models are really hard. So this is just the Learning Council's model of all things on your landscape, and it certainly probably doesn't represent every single thing on your landscape. You'll notice the orange boxes are your hardware and networking side. A lot of sophisticated issues on that side. But then you have your major systems in green, which include something else I'm going to talk about today now called the hybrid logistics scheduling platform. That's a forthcoming technology I'm going to, like I said, I'll brief you on. But then you also have your sovereign identity, your rostering, that's your single sign-on, all your access management. You have huge security worries now, data warehousing, analytics, and other middleware. All those things sit over in your IT side. They're very hard, they're very complex. And then you got outside service contractors doing integrations or however you're doing all that. And then below that in all your software systems are your big iron student information systems, your learning management systems, grading, testing, facilities management, your PD platform, your financial, your chatbot platform, office suites. And then you get into the issues about workflow. That's because over here where we're showing grades, it doesn't show every single grade, but certainly they're all in there. Every grade, every teacher is using a series of apps. The average number of apps of a teacher is about 176. That's huge, right? And then maybe only one of them is using one of them, and you bought a license for everybody, and only one teacher is using it seriously. Those are the issues that schools are confronted with right now. And the average district has 1,000, maybe 2,000 apps in play. Some of the big districts, like Houston IST, has over 2 million digital learning objects in the repository, and just one of them could be everything more, that was just shared from Renaissance. So Renaissance would count as one, but it's actually bajillions of things in there. So then you get into this thing called auto cohorting, auto distribution of resources, auto calendaring, live intersection. That's a forthcoming thing, because as you can see from this map, K-12 education is running one of the most sophisticated operations in software and hardware networks that ever was. It's certainly more difficult than almost any other. I can't think of a more complicated industry. So the forthcoming thing that you'll be seeing, and you'll be seeing a lot of this in 2022 through 2025, is things that manage the workflow between things that actually automate personalization and AI. So those are the forthcoming things. All right, so the real digital transition, this is actually a way to simplify what you're looking at, what you're living through, is that we came from the world where we were sort of a manufacturing plant. The whole group, grades, classes, courses, was a pyramid bureaucracy with students at the bottom, superintendent at the top, and the board. But now we're running two rails at the same time, and they're not separate rails only, although AB1 that was just passed in California is requiring all school districts to have a separate online school. We know who lobbied for that. And yeah, so that's going to be wild for them. But we're in that mutation moment between being what we always were structurally and how we were organized, and something new that is far more individualized and personalized and just throws time and space out the window. So living between those two worlds is a recipe for insanity. It's like trying to be retail store and Amazon at the same time, but together. That's really hard. And that's really what you're experiencing. But here's where it's going. It's going towards fully personalized and individualized learning. I know that sounds like it's insane because we're used to a whole group, but it's a distributed service model. It will also use extraliminal network organization, which means which is one of the reasons why we really like Cisco being on here as a sponsor, is extraliminal means outside your immediate area, right? Like your domain is your institution, your teachers, your buildings, all that stuff. But so many schools during the pandemic, just to fill teaching holes, were saying, could I use your science teacher 3 districts over for this slot that I need? Could we do that? Could I hire this outside organization to do some of my extracurricular courses that I can't deliver because I don't have the teaching staff to do it? Could we just do that? All kinds of those machinations have been happening. That's called extraliminal, outside your normal limits. And we're moving to a flipped administration. So see how the whole administration flips. So the organization now is serving a one-to-one model that is all digital, all networked all the time. And the whole group is mutating to what we call a dynamic cohort based on pace. And that's very exciting. This is the exciting stuff to come out of the pandemic. So we know this is happening, this hybrid logistics, dynamic cohorting, change in structure thing, because we started to actually advance this. See the game board on your screen right now on the top right? That's a game board we physically printed out into I think it was 10-foot by 30-foot board, and we physically had people standing on it and reading from their roles. Some were kids that were in that history twister board, step 1, and some were math kids. And then there was teachers and there was supervisors. And every 30 seconds, everybody switched to their next game role, their next spot in learning. And then you'd see some of them leave and go to a classroom, and some of them come back after that. But this was a different model, and we called it the hybrid logistics or personalized workflow model. But it's Uberization. So if you've ever ridden on a Lyft or an Uber, you understand what I'm talking about. The teacher intersection can be precisely focused and Uberized. So your asynchronous learning is asynchronous. Maybe it's on campus, maybe the kids are off campus. If they're off campus, they get a pop-up link from Cisco WebEx, and then they go to the class that way. If they're physically on campus, then they leave their homeroom or their Starbucks room and they go to the classroom, but they're not always in a class. They're in a homeroom. So this is a different model. And we know that it's going somewhere because Israel, as you can see from their game board, they came out with it the next year. So this is a very hot topic from people who really know logistics and understand planning and scheduling that is as sophisticated as trying to get a box from California via FedEx to China overnight. So that level of logistics and algorithms governing who goes where on what part of the learning journey is coming to education. All right, so here's what's in your leadership versus systemic inequities special report. And I want to go over these with everyone. And Cisco talked a little bit about space and motion, which you can see in the middle of the slide at the bottom. The space and motion of digital traditional, although alternatively scheduled now, like Maury was talking about, and we're hearing all over the New York area and most states now, you have AB days, AB weeks, schedules, start times, different parts of the year. We have alternate schedules. So we've already mutated dramatically during the pandemic, just with time, which is impacting the use of space, which is impacting flow, which is why you're impacting your networks. But notice in this triangle, just above that little triangle there, the basic organizing structure is built to create identical outcomes and individualizes within narrow parameters. So when we talk about personalized learning, most of the time, what teachers are doing is tweaking the existing lesson to have additional resources for the kid who needs them. That's normally what we say when we're personalizing, but that's not what happens in the digital world. The digital world, if you've played any digital games, is highly personalized, and you're gated to the next level when you win enough of your rounds or whatever. And there's whole worlds that are math worlds and those kinds of things. So the definition shifted a lot during the pandemic of what it means to truly personalize. It's the material, it's the time, it's the space, all those things. So if you look in the middle of the triangle, the teacher is kind of doing a lot. This is the digital traffic I talked about earlier. So that teacher to whole group in the digital sphere is a lot of management. So what was just happened in California is there's new language in a law that's about to pass that essentially says when online teaching, you're not allowed to instruct, which is really a strange thing unless you know education. Like, what? What do you mean? Well, that was because a lot of California leaders decided that just trying to instruct as if you're in a physical classroom via a WebEx Meet, Teams Meet, whatever you're using, during the whole day and run it as if you're in the physical building for the online kids doesn't really work for the kids. They need a different sort of thing being done when they're online, which is more asynchronous learning. And when you are together, it's highly specific. So that Uberization moment, the exact transaction of what the definition of teaching is not necessarily all going to be lecture-based. It's going to most definitely move in the direction of very precision direct instruction and precision group discussion, small group, whole group. So that discussion about what's happening with the digital traditional or alt schedule is everybody's alt schedule. There's no true traditional anymore. So number one is already a mutation point, but let's go to the next one, which is blended or flipped. So this definition is really only different in that everything that is asynchronous is trying to be being planned or being policy led by the management of the district or school to be done at night hours, right? Like you're supposed to do your reading after school. So that means all of the planning by teachers has to move in that direction of purposeful precision togetherness so that when you are together, you're doing things together, you're learning things together. You're not just sitting in the class doing your reading. You're supposed to do that at a different time. Competency-based traditional or contemporary, the basic organizing structure of that, you won't see in a lot of public education. You see it in a lot of private schools who are small and have fewer teachers. You see this with a lot of sort of homeschooling. Essentially, it's been around for 50, 60 years. You're not teaching in this model. You're guiding. Every step is normally in a workbook, might be digital now, courses, all digital, every student's on their own path. What the teacher is doing is unraveling parts where the students stumble and very, like I said, very little lecturing. So that model has been around a really long time, particularly in the private schools who, like I said, never had the staff to do anything else. And they had kids at all different ages, so it didn't make sense to do it any other way. That's a very common model, and it's a predicate for the later hybrid logistics model. Fully online traditional, man, did those companies grow over the last year and a half. They're on 1,000% growth with some of them. Those are the ones that you can partner with in many instances, and they just come in and they take over the full K through 12 everything. They can still use your teachers, but they're still running everything alongside of you. They have a lot of logistics work that they do. They can run all courses non-synchronized start times. So you start at any time, end at any time, that kind of thing. Fully online contemporary, actually, I'm wrong about that. So this last one, fully online traditional. We know that one because that one runs like normal classes and courses all with synchronized start time. But the asynchronous, fully direct consumer model, this is straight out of buy it online, buy the subscription, do it all myself as a homeschooler. And there's a lot of companies that K-12 executives have never heard about that are doing this now directly for the American public, actually global public. This is the newest model. Not the newest, but the hybrid simultaneous is what everybody started to use because teachers were teaching simultaneously, kids live in front of them, and ones that were at home, which is what Maury was talking about when she talked about the buddy system, which is really a smart move. It's a great tip of the day you should be implementing if you're using this model. We don't think this is going to go away anytime soon. This may be a permanent model for the next couple of years as people start to think about truly moving to hybrid logistics with all of the new fancy stuff that's happening there. But this isn't really going to go away because you never know when some kid's going to go into quarantine or teacher or whatever. Hybrid logistics contemporary is the newest restructuring of everything model. The basic organizing structure is on demand via the network. So it's the Uberization of the learning. Still uses buildings, still uses teachers. That's what the miracle of this model is we all know teachers are super important. There's a lot of kids who really have to be handheld. They have to have another human going, did you open your book? Did you log on? What did you do today? And make sure that they're getting all their stuff done. But the logistics of it changes entirely. You're not having bells ring constantly. Kids are in giant houses or homerooms or Starbucks rooms, on campus, off campus, remote, whatever. When they reach a point where the point is actually a live lecture or group come togetherness for some reason, it gives them a transactional moment. It Uberizes it. So if the teacher set it for 10 students arriving at this point in their lesson sequence, then if they were the first one in, they're told, go study something else for right now. You're the first one in this thing. Teachers are watching dashboards, of course, on all of this, just like what ClassLink was showing you in terms of pace, and a lot of software, a lot of courseware shows this already. But when the 10th one arrives, it auto triggers, checks the teacher's calendar, triggers to the classroom of choice, also puts in the WebEx link for kids that are remote. And then people get little pop-ups. Oh, you're due in half an hour to go to this classroom. Okay, great. So that's what the hybrid logistics model is. Doesn't sacrifice the teacher intersection, but does use advanced logistics and advanced algorithms to create purposeful intersection where needed, where all the rest is asynchronous. What that does is it removes the classroom discipline work that is a lot of teacher time when they're running their classroom for the whole day, or they have 4 periods that they're running, when really they're really only doing direct instruction for half an hour of an hour. The rest is really asynchronous work. That's the difference in this model. So I'm going to make sure that anybody who's on the line with us right now, if you want to pop in and ask questions, give a comment or a chat or a shout out or argue or anything like that, please do so, because we really want to hear from you. We've been talking about this all over the country. People are sort of electrified by it. I know Nashville was just the other day, so was Orlando. Tons of questions. But when you're live with people, it's easier to sort of, raise your hand and do a shout out than it is digitally. Okay, Pamela Dean, I saw your remark. Thank you for that. Is there anything else you want to say? Should we unmute you? Just type in more if you want to. Okay, so this model, and I will get into more specifics on it, is a space rework, right? It starts with a space rework as well as curriculum map rework. So this is just that same sample showing a bunch of kids in a giant homeroom or converted classroom or 2 classrooms smushed together with the door open between. Essentially, kids are at those little corrals, where they're big tables socially distanced. You might have a interactive whiteboard area for when the teachers are floating in and checking on kids and pulling them aside. These 2 are way behind in this math lesson sequence. So he comes in, says, hey, come over here for a second. I want to go over something with you, to speed them up because you can watch their pace. Maybe a little meeting area, but everybody's on different steps. You can see this. So some kids they went and checked with their house leader, who's maybe also a teacher, got other classes they also do. Those kids are in motion out to a class, right? And then they come back from that. Maybe they go over to the cafeteria eating lab, but teachers would have offices so they can watch dashboards, and kids are asynchronous doing the rest of their stuff. Let me know if you guys have any questions on this. You can see in the image, one teacher is already roaming in there, checking up on kids, and has taken a few aside to help them out. Here's the thing that I had one superintendent observe that I now repeat every time I talk about this, is that he thought this was the coolest thing ever, because if you're watching student pace and you really are truly individualized on pace, but still intersected, one of the really great things could be is that you look at one student and say, hey, this student is way ahead in language, but they're way behind in math. Let's rotate back their schedule. Let's undo the hours they dedicate to language daily and pump up the math and pull in some more direct instruction. That will never happen in a whole group situation, right? That's not going to happen because of the way we structure time and space use in the traditional model. but this model, that could happen like that, right? So you're watching your dashboard, you're like, hey, scale this student up on this and scale this thing to that on that. Easy peasy, right? When you're doing it this way. The other thing that is really interesting is the fact that the direct instruction time of the teachers would go up exponentially, because now they've looked at how they're going to pace all their lessons and they've said, okay, I only need 20 minutes for this come together cohort moment, because all the rest of this stuff is individually being sequenced through and I can watch it on a dashboard. I can see when a kid just stops cold right there and get a hold of them and go, what's happening? You haven't moved on this in a whole day. Like, what is going on with you? And then handle that, right, with direct instruction. You can't really do that in a whole group way, right? Like maybe the really great teachers, like they can see in a live class, that kid didn't get it. They're like, their light bulb in their head, just you see it dim in their eyes. I got to go handle it, right? Like keep them after class for a little bit. And brilliant teachers will do that all the time. There's a lot of technology that can come into play to ensure that in the way that it's articulated, the learning itself via the user interface and user experience. If it's totally flat digital, it's just words on a PDF, or like watch this video and do an essay, that's really not going digital, that's digitized. You've digitized the analog way, you didn't go fully digital. So you have to think with this paradigm that I'm talking to you about that's coming down the road as something that really embraces the full capacities and articulations of digital for what it can do for learning, but it doesn't sacrifice useful human intersection. In fact, it elevates it. It isolates it for its perfect thing that it is and distributes it in a new way. So a lot of schools have already talked about this last model, which is the one before it and the first one, the traditional, in a hybrid high flex. So what that means is the inability for most big districts to just go, oh, yeah, let's change everything and go to that model. Like that's not going to happen, right? Like overnight, no, people would freak out, lose their hair, it would be insanity. So instead, they can think with, you know what, this hybrid high flex, algorithmic cohorting, and everybody's on their own path, and the teachers get to do this all differently, and people are in their homerooms. We already do homerooms in our district, so let's do this. Let's do remedial and a lot of the extracurricular as a 1 hour to 2 hour carve out a day or full day a week. Let's do that, and then let's have dedicated space for that day or that time, and we'll Uberize those subjects and that need, especially remedial, just the way the hybrid model works. It Uberize it, but retain everything else that we've always done for now, and then we can gradually shift to a full contemporization with hybrid logistics as a model. In fact, we think that the bulk of the market will be doing this, and a lot of them already are. So I'm going to talk about some of the best examples. But if you think about hybrid logistics, you see this little image of a cell phone here. It's a pop-up. It says, just like Uber when you use the app, hey, your math class will start in 3 minutes, room 10B. Here's your web meet link, right? Oh, well, okay, right? This is how we would run the motion, like Cisco was talking about, of students to intersect correctly with a teacher at just the right time. Keep in mind that advanced logistics can reroute the packages at any moment. So if a teacher's watching a student's motion, they can like, click, let's plan a meeting with this kid, right? Like let's have a one-on-one because they need it or whatever, right? Or these three, let's have some like 30 minutes of direct instruction just for them. That's the gift of truly advanced algorithms and what we call the Uberization of learning. So this is the definition here. It's a new emerging and disruptive technology for education that Learning Council has been researching to Uberize teaching to precisely harness human teaching skill. Now, let me say, before I get into the full definition, the only reason that Learning Council got pulled into this is the EduJedi talking about it, playing that game that we did in 2019 and saying, we want this right now. This was before the pandemic. We need this model. We need it right now. And then we did our due diligence, and we found that no one was doing this. The master scheduling, master calendaring, curriculum mapping, student information systems, learning management systems were not doing what was necessary from a technology perspective. So Learning Counsel itself jumped in to start working through what would need to be in a system. And then we're actually building that model so that there's a demonstration model for the future that will be able to show people what it's supposed to do. That will also be useful. So a hybrid logistics interchange is what we've named this thing. And it's a software ecosystem to automate the pacing guides, which is a missing element. Most school districts are PDF only, spreadsheet only. It's independent from their LMS or the SIS, because a pacing guide is essentially, here's the standards. Let's clump these 3 standards together and stick them on weeks 1 through 3 for math teacher in 6th grade. That's a pacing guide. So it's like, if I'm a 6th grade teacher, I want to know all the standards that I'm supposed to teach week by week, because then I can plan my lessons, and my floater standards that I'm supposed to somehow fit in sometime in the course of the year. So I can also do lessons for them and stick them in my calendar. So here I am, I'm a teacher, and I'm looking at those pacing guides, and I'm like, what am I, what, when? Okay, now my calendar, where's my calendar? Here's my calendar. Okay, I still do this. Okay, where's my resources, and what do I build lessons in? And where do I stick those? Okay, so then I got to go over here. I got to look at that, and I got to look at my schedule. I have this hour on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I have another hour on late Tuesday, Thursday, another hour on Friday. So I got to look at this over here, and I got to look at my materials and what I'm going to do, and then I got to calendar it. That's ridiculous. I'm just going to say it. That's a ridiculous model in terms of user interface, user experience. And I don't know why we're doing it to people, because it's a little insane. So you have something now that is forthcoming, automating your lessons, your pacing guides as a mirrored multi-level calendar behind your lesson building, your schedule, your school space use, with an automated Uberization cap to all of that. Okay, so this is the more full definition of hybrid logistics. I just want to point out that the point is this last bullet: teachers using their time succinctly for these planned transactional moments, and the rest of their time catching up students in trailing cohorts and customizing. It's a different world than we live in right now, but I want you to envision it, because it would be awesome. And this is a new emerging disruptive technology, a lot like Uberizing, okay? So going back to this basic organizing structure, just refreshing your mind. This is where we've been with motion. This is where we're going with motion. Totally different pattern. It's a network pattern. We're becoming the internet is essentially what's happening. And how we'll probably be initially, starting as soon as 2022, going into 2023, you're going to see an explosion of this. And part of it's a survival issue. If you're losing a lot of kids to homeschooling, you know you can push the button of, yeah, but humans, yeah, but socialization, yeah, but. And you're right. Most parents don't want their kids completely isolated and only learning online. This is just a truth. But they also don't want non-personalized, homogenized, systemic inequity of treat my kid the same as everybody else in their age and grade group, because they don't learn that way. There's no seamlessness to humanity. It's all over the map. So when you're looking at this, you're going to say to yourself, okay, it's probably the direction we're going to go. We're going to do a little carve out. So that's where it will normally start. So this is what I kind of want to lead us to talk about right now as a group. And I got to check who's with me right now. Who's with me? So I can get Doug ready to unmute anybody at any time, so you guys can speak up. And that includes everybody that's on, including Mary. Hi, Mary. Let's talk about this. So the first thing is, every area we've been in Orlando did this to us, so did Nashville, so did Atlanta. They said, we want to talk first about number 4. Imagine the experience and results when you move your structure. You can think with any of the models we just talked about, but be a student and imagine what that would be like for you. with your own learning difficulties in maybe one subject, but brilliance in every other one. Just imagine what it would be like to have a wraparound customization based on your own pace. And maybe you're told, much to your chagrin, I'm sorry, you're spending the whole year on math because you're way ahead in everything else. So this is going to be your math year. It's going to be Agni, but go on with your bad self. So imagine how that would be like. Yeah, Matt, let's call on Matt. Like, can we unmute Matt? Okay, you're not. Can we understand? You're just, maybe it's like too loud behind you. So Mary, if you want to speak up, and I'll allowing you to talk. Anyone else that wants to talk? Oh, my good friend Suzanne is on.
LeiLani, I think this is really exciting as we really go forward to reimagine what we want education to be. And I think this is the time when we can truly think limitless about this, because I think we've been held back prior to the pandemic of, hey, this is tradition, this is the way it's always been, this is what works. But we all knew that that wasn't what always worked for all students. And we had a lot of families that were really asking for some accommodations. If it's a parent that travels due to work and things like that, and they need to be able to pull students out, schools were getting pretty tough about, they're absent. It doesn't matter, there's no excuse. So now I think that since the pandemic, where the families are starting to put that shift back in, saying, no, this is what's best for our family. And I think it's kind of an exciting piece, right?
Yep. Yeah. And it's different way to think. But you pointed out something extraordinarily important. The way it's always been done.
Yeah.
It's been done a certain way forever. But higher ed better than almost anyone I know. And they tried to stick with the way it's always been done, even pre-pandemic, and they got slaughtered in the process. Yeah, you want to talk about that for a second? Because I think they're a place to look at for what had to happen to them.
Yeah, and they still are. There's still some campuses that are pushing back, saying, we are known for our student-centric environment, and we do not want to embrace any type of online learning or things like that. And working with those schools pre-pandemic, I'd say, but that's also what's limiting your enrollment. And, so you had to think about where's the money come from? And I think we have that here going on in K-12, right? With the way the funding formulas are. We need to have students enrolled in our schools. Well, what does that school look like? Virtual, hybrid? These learning models, and I'm working with schools that are trying to be very delineated. This is our traditional face-to-face, and this other school is our virtual school. So now we can get funding for both models, but we're keeping them separate because I think part of it is a mindset of us educators to say we can't be fluid. And I really challenge us to think differently and to be more fluid for the needs of the students.
Yeah. And the competition that's there now is forcing that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because the attrition is unbelievable. Yeah, and it's such a heartfelt thing. People don't want to give up that human intersection. And I agree with that. I just don't think it's a perfected intersection. It's nothing like what the commercial side would be doing. So we have another hand raised here. Let me see who's got their hand raised. Maury. Hi, Maury.
Hi, I love question 4. One of those things that I think would be amazing if we stop siloing so much after we get the foundations done. I know our CTE students, before the pandemic, we were trying to use electricity and carpentry and say they're using algebra in very functional ways. So if they're going to learn it there, actually, sometimes before they get to the algebra class, why are they then retaking algebra Or why can't we do curriculum in a different way in which we figure out how some of these things get pushed in more, instead of trying to say you have to have all of these classes, because we didn't know how to blend classes together that have components that overlap, that are actually make the curriculum more alive rather than just practical application.
Yeah. Yeah. There's many directions this goes, but you have to let your mind go to this new way to structure. And it looks like we have Pamela raise her hand, and then Matt, you're in a position to be able to share as well. So Pamela, I think I unmuted you if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. This has been really informative and thought-provoking. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. When you were showing, there was the model where, the kids were in the class and everyone was working on a different math lesson, and then there were different spaces on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
This reminded me, yes, this concept here in the middle with the full class, it reminded me very much of something that I did in 2016 in a class that I was teaching, where it quickly became apparent at the beginning of the school year that the students were at such disparate levels in their math at fourth grade that teaching a whole class lesson just was not going to work. I had students that were above level. I had students that were still working on kindergarten level, and it just wasn't going to work. And so instead of teaching from the paper textbook, I found the exact same program online and monitored students. And as they were having difficulties, I would invite them over to have their lesson with me. And some kids came a lot, some kids didn't come at all, because they were able to work through the material on their own, given all of the supports that were within that program. And then the result of that was that at the end of the year, everybody had completed that year's math work, but some kids have been able to do all sorts of extra things. Some kids had moved on and started the next grade level's work to get a head start, because that particular school let students go ahead by up to 2 years. So they were able to work their way into higher level classes. But when we came to the state testing, that was where it really showed, because while it wasn't, a great result, the previous year, those exact same students had only 11% of them had proficiency in math. But at the end of this year, 33% of them had proficiency in math. So depending on how you look at it, it's a 200% increase, right?
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And so I really liked this model, and especially, I was thinking back to my own high school experience, and I was always a very good student, and I often found myself, I don't want to use the word bored, but perhaps distracted and not paying as much attention as I should, because I was grasping the concepts more quickly than some of my classmates were. And I perfectly understand that everybody has different time frames that they learn things in. But for me, that was a very frustrating experience, because I just wanted to move on, and we couldn't, because everybody had to work on lesson 1 today, lesson 2 tomorrow, lesson 3 the following day. So this particular space rework really excited me.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we hear everywhere we go. There's resistance, but why? Right. We have to ask ourselves that. Like, why would you not want what you just described? Like,
Right.
why would you not want that? Right. Like, that's so beautiful. And it really has to do with, like, I'm used to doing it a different way. And this is like my little, I'm the queen of this, and my little power structure as a leader and the administrator. This is the way it's always been done. And I have an army, and they sit in their rooms and,
right.
So it's a very interesting thing.
Currently at the school that I'm at, it's a 3rd through 8th grade school, but we do offer three ninth grade classes, so that kids can get a head start on their high school career.
Wow.
So one of those classes that we offer is a 9th grade STEM class. And so the concern going into that was, well, what if the students don't do well? What if they fail? Because then they're heading into high school with a negative GPA before they've even technically started high school. And so I asked the question, well, can't we have, since we're using an online platform and it's student-based and student-paced, why can't we have 2 classes assigned to the same teacher at the same time because he's not planning. The approved curriculum is already online. He's just offering the supports to students that need it. And so that's what we've done. Any student that had less than a 50 at the end of the first quarter, they stay in the same class, same teacher, same work, but now they're doing an 8th grade STEM class instead of a 9th grade STEM class. So it will save them time in the summer. It will save them having, negative GPAs before they start high school. And yet the students that are able to do it will end up starting high school with high school courses already finished. So
Yeah, you
that's
just
sort of what's happening here. And it's really exciting in my opinion.
Yeah. And you just pointed out really the core of what I'm talking about. This is really the systemic inequity of structuring on the idea that everybody's the same and has to pace the same and has to stay in their age group and move along the rail of the manufacturing line. Thank you for that. Okay. So Matt, are you with us? Matt, you want to speak up?
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. And this kind of goes back to your comments about the difference between doing something truly digital and digitizing. So the third point on there was barriers. And we had Cisco talking about DC being such a large district. I'm about 30 minutes outside of DC. And we're fairly large too. We have about 85,000 students. And in our office, I work in instructional technology. In our office, we often say our district is like the Titanic. It turns very slowly. Mm-hmm. And so our big project right now is implementing a brand new learning management system. And it is a big project, but in a lot of ways, it really has just reinforced traditional structure. We're not really doing anything innovative with it. And so a lot of what we run into is, I love the ideas you're talking about, but I'm just a classroom teacher. I'm just an administrator in this massive district, and I'm not really high enough up to see, no matter how much I want this, I don't have the power to make this kind of thing happen. But what I've been encouraged by is just how much teachers are willing to do, in spite of them being overwhelmed, in spite of them being overworked, in spite of everything they've put up with for the last 18 months. And it just, as an example, I had a friend on Twitter. I don't have a lot of followers on Twitter. I'm somewhere around like 1,200. So I'm not someone that starts trends there, right? But I had a friend who asked me, hey, I had a request for a SAMR model using Microsoft tools. Do you know of one? It's like, well, no, but I'll throw one together. And it amazes me. There's things that I have spent days and days working on, and I put it out, and it just silence when I drop it. And this was something I threw together in like 45 minutes, and like 70,000 people clicked on it.
Wow.
And it was just a SAMR model, and I'll kind of throw a link to it in the chat. But
Thank you.
It's things, and there's other examples. Lots of these already exist. All I did was I added some interactivity to it, and just the hunger of the classroom teacher who isn't in a position to completely redo the model of their school, but they'll latch on to anything that can help them personalize learning. They'll latch on to anything that can help them as much as they have the capability to make these kinds of changes, and to not just settle for, I'm going to put the PDF online in, oh, well, here's a program where I can put the PDF online and it's editable. All right, that's a little better, but that they're looking for, how can I actually transform the instruction I'm doing in my classroom?
Yeah, because they're operating from where they're operating from. But everybody has this feeling, this instinct to personalize, and it's the right one. So thank you.
Because we know it's the right thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it is the right thing to do.